we're going to talk about public lands, which really define a big part of who we are as Idahoans. 62% of our state's land mass is either BLM land, national monument land, wildlife refugee, or other public property. So I was born in Grangeville and raised in Kuski, Idaho, which is on the edge of the Frank Church Wilderness area. You'll find the scenic Lochsaw and Selway rivers there, some premium whitewater rafting that I've enjoyed with some of you that I see here today, fishing, hunting, camping, biking, huckleberry picking, Idaho stuff, right? I studied chemistry at the University of Idaho and focused on water quality improvement in freshwater lakes. My husband Brock and I moved to Coeur d'Alene about 13 years ago. And then my relationship with politics, I guess, and public policy really began on a hot summer evening, a lot like this one, in July of 2007. And I was changing my newborn baby's diaper, Brady, and my husband came home from work unexpectedly that day, early, to tell me that the doctor had called and our baby had been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which is a rare genetic disease, and that really turned our world upside down. And we quickly learned that access to the kind of specialized medicine he needed was out of reach for many. So I began interacting with my lawmakers as a mother and a constituent, and eventually as a healthcare advocate for the nonprofit, nonpartisan Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And that experience is really what motivated me to run for office myself. But that may be what brought me to the table, but let me assure you that I have opinions about almost everything. So keeping public land in Idahoans' public hands is absolutely something that I will stand up and fight for. So I want to just set the stage. There's a long-standing movement to transfer public land from the federal government to the state. And to compound issues, in January of 2016, there was a change in the U.S. House rules that removed a significant budget hurdle, written very broadly as to threaten even our national parks. And we've already seen that in some states. Examples include the reduction in the size of the Bears Ears and Escalante monuments in Utah. And there are really several issues with the land transfer from public hands to state of Idaho ownership. And I'd like to talk about some of those. So since becoming a state, Idaho has sold off 41% of all of the acres granted to the state. So worry and concern about more sell-offs is absolutely founded. In many cases, the sales have cut off public access to our cherished outdoor recreation spots, or even allowed lands to become industrialized in some cases. Another factor is the enormous cost of forest fire management that the state of Idaho would be forced to assume. The inability to financially manage these lands could and has been used as an excuse for land sale, despite evidence of the negative fiscal impact. Idaho lawmakers continue to pursue land transfers to the state endowment. And that is a little bit complicated because the Idaho State Constitution designates that state endowment land should be managed to maximize revenue. That's what it says in the Constitution, not your recreational opportunities, not your memories with your family, revenue. So I don't know how you put a price tag on something like access to Tubbs Hill, which is where Brock proposed to me, so romantic. What does that mean to our community? And where would we be without advocates like Scott Reed, who fought to keep public access to parts of Tubbs Hill? So the language in the Constitution of Idaho regarding state endowment land has been used also as a reason for land sale to maximize short-term profits. But sale of endowment land requires no public input to the state, and that's worrisome. Federal management, while not perfect, at least has several goals in mind with recreation, water, and wildlife, rather than just revenue included among those goals. More than just short-term economic gain for public access. And speaking of revenue, let's zoom out a little bit and take a broader look at what our public lands actually mean to our economy. I think this is a perfect example of how public lands support a booming outdoor recreation and tourism industry. The Idaho Department of Tourism reports that the travel and tourism industry provides $1.8 billion in annual gross sales, supports 27,000 jobs, $620 million in annual wages, right? Some of you are making those wages. The Outdoor Recreation Association found that $154 million in annual state tax revenue is generated via outdoor recreation, and we produce $2.2 billion annually in retail sales and service sales across Idaho, accounting for nearly 5% of our state gross product. Sales of public lands are short-sighted and only offer short-term profits. And Idahoans see this, right? We understand this. We know how important our public lands are to our economy and to our lifestyle. Studies and polls show that people in Idaho overwhelmingly support the protection of public lands from private interests. There seems to be a disconnect between the will of the people and the trend to, thanks Nash, to weaken protections for protection of our state lands. It's through the state that public lands end up in the hands of corporations and private individuals, and that is land that we will never get back. So currently, there is a proposal called the Central Idaho Land Exchange that's being considered, and this would result in the loss of tens of thousands of acres of land in the Nez Perce Clearwater Forest, where I grew up. This is a rebranded version of the Lochsaw Land Exchange, and the Upper Lochsaw area has tremendous historical, cultural, ecological, and socioeconomic value. There are traditional lands of the Nez Perce tribe. Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery traveled this area. It is truly an Idaho treasure. And too much of that land has already been lost. So we really need to work to regain those pieces that have been lost rather than talking about sacrificing even more. Land exchanges in the Lochsaw drainage have been promoted and supported by our current lawmakers since 2007 by Senator Risch, for example, but the failure for public support has failed those initiatives. But we still have the same representatives, and they are pushing for similar land transfers, meaning that the need to defend our public lands in Idaho is constant. Public lands that contain important fish and wildlife habitat and that are used extensively by the public for hunting and fishing and hiking and other activities are not for sale, right? I mean, isn't that one thing that we can agree upon, is that we have to work to protect access to our public lands. So there are a few things that we can and must do to ensure that we have access to our public lands. You can contact your lawmakers that represent you now and tell them that you oppose transfers of public lands from our hands to the state. You can register to vote. That's what I'd recommend you do. Register to vote. There are a lot of folks around holding clipboards that have voter registration, also absentee ballot request forms that allow you to vote by mail. So if the line's long, if you get called into work that day, whatever, it doesn't matter. Your ballot comes a couple of weeks early, so you have time to research the candidates and the initiatives, like the Medicaid expansion initiative that will be on the ballot in November as well. So please register to vote. Now, I realize that not every individual has the same ideas on how multi-use public lands should be accessed, right? And I'm sure that this group has a lot to teach me about that, and I need to learn from you. So please come chat with me. I'm staying for the music. I'm staying for a beer. But I do know that when our lands are privatized, we lose the ability to be a part of the conversation about their use. So if you want to make sure that your representative here in District 4 will stand up and fight for public lands, then you should help me get elected. That's what you should do. Volunteering for the campaign is great. There's a lot of work to be done. Sign up to receive my newsletter so you never miss an event like this. Last month I talked about protecting our water quality in Lake Coeur d'Alene, and next month I'm going to be talking about legalizing cannabis in Idaho. So sign up for my newsletter. We have some sweet Rebecca for Idaho swag, and contributions of any size to the campaign are appreciated. Politics is really not a game for people who recently paid off their student loans. Woohoo! But I'm not going to let that stop me. We're going to raise the money bit by bit, and I'm going to walk away with my integrity because I'm not accepting any corporate PAC money. I'm not for sale. I'm not for sale. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for listening. Again, my name is Rebecca Schroeder, and I'm asking you for your vote on November 6th. My heart is wrapped around this state. I care about this place so much, and I'm willing to fight for our access to public lands. Thank you.